The rain was hammering against the asphalt of Fifth Avenue that night, washing away the sins of the city, or so people hoped. Inside the Vesper Lounge, the air was thick with cigar smoke and the scent of expensive bourbon. Lord Brian Moretti, the man who owned half the city's underground, sat in his usual booth, eyes cold as ice. The room was silent, respectful of his presence. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors burst open. It wasn't a rival gang or a police raid. It was a 5-year-old girl, soaked to the bone, her pink coat muddy. She scrambled past the confused bodyguards and slammed into Lord Brian's legs, trembling violently. When she looked up, her eyes were wide with a terror no child should know. "He's coming," she sobbed. "Please, he's right behind me." Lord Brian didn't push her away. He set his glass down. "Who?" he asked, his voice low. When she whispered the name, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Lord Brian stood up, and for the first time in years, the devil in him didn't just wake up. It roared. The Vesper Lounge was not a place for children. It was a sanctuary for men who made decisions that altered the stock market and the crime rate in equal measure. The lighting was amber and low, the leather booths deep burgundy, and the music a soft, unobtrusive jazz that covered the sound of deals being struck. Lord Brian Moretti was not a man who enjoyed interruptions. At 34, he was the youngest Don the Moretti crime family had ever seen, and arguably the most ruthless. He didn't rule with shouting. He ruled with silence. "The shipment from the docks is delayed, boss," his right-hand man, Dante, said, checking his watch. "Customs is sniffing around container 4B. Brian swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "Pay the inspector double. If he refuses, remind him we know where his daughter goes to piano lessons." Dante nodded, scribbling a note. It was business as usual. Cold, calculated, detached. That was until the front doors crashed open. The bouncer, a giant named Tiny, stepped forward to intercept the intruder, but he froze. It wasn't a threat. It was a child. A little girl no older than Fintel, with blonde curls plastered to her forehead by the torrential rain outside. She was gasping for air, her tiny chest heaving. She looked around the room, her eyes darting frantically until they landed on Brian. Most people looked at Brian and saw death. This child looked at him and saw a wall, a shield. She bolted. Tiny reached out a hand but pulled it back, confused. The girl scrambled under the table of a shocked politician and sprinted toward the VIP booth in the back. "Hey!" Dante barked, reaching for his waistband. "Stand down!" Brian commanded, his voice cutting through the tension. The girl crashed into Brian's legs. She smelled of rain and cheap strawberry shampoo. Her tiny hands gripped the fabric of his $3,000 Italian suit trousers so hard her knuckles turned white. "He's coming!" she screamed, burying her face in his knee. "Hide me, please!" The entire lounge went deathly silent. The piano player stopped mid-chord. Brian looked down. He didn't like children. They were messy, loud, and liabilities. But as he looked at the trembling creature attached to his leg, he saw something else. On her small wrist, just below the sleeve of her muddy pink coat, was a bruise, a distinct purple mark in the shape of a thumbprint. Brian's jaw tightened. He reached down not to shove her away, but to place a large, calloused hand on her head. "Who is coming, Piccola?" Brian asked. His voice was surprisingly gentle, a stark contrast to the violence he was capable of. "The bad man," she sobbed, "with the badge." Brian's eyes snapped up to Dante. "Badge. Polissima Tusul." Before Dante could respond, the doors opened again. This time, it wasn't a child. It was a woman. Emily Vance. Brian recognized her instantly, though he hadn't seen her in 3 years. She had been a waitress at one of his legitimate casinos. She was beautiful then, with fire in her eyes. Now she looked broken. Her uniform was torn at the shoulder, her hair wild, and blood trickled from a cut on her lip. She stumbled into the room, scanning the area, until she saw the girl clinging to Brian. Pure terror washed over her face, not of the man chasing her, but of Brian himself. She knew who he was. She knew what he was. "Lily!" Emily gasped, rushing forward, ignoring the bodyguards who stepped into her path. "Lily! Get away from him! Let her through!" Brian said, his eyes never leaving Emily's face. Emily fell to her knees beside the booth, grabbing the girl Lily and pulling her into her arms. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Moretti. I'm so sorry. We'll leave. Please don't hurt her." "Why did she run to me?" Brian asked, ignoring the apology. He looked at Emily, really looked at her. She was terrified. She watches the news," Emily stammered, wiping water from Lily's face. "She saw you on TV when you were acquitted. She thinks you're the king." "The king? Because nobody can touch you," Emily whispered. "She thinks you're the only one the monsters are afraid of." The heavy oak doors opened a third time. The atmosphere in the room shifted from confused to volatile. The man who walked in brought the smell of ozone and stale cigarettes with him. He was wearing a trench coat, and the gold badge on his belt was visible as he unbuttoned it. Detective Marcus Harrow, Vice Squad. Brian knew him. Harrow was a dirty cop who played both sides, but lately he had become erratic, violent, a loose cannon that the precinct couldn't control. Harrow stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his nose. His eyes were manic. He scanned the room and smiled when he saw Emily and Lily huddled by Brian's booth. "There you are, you little rats," Harrow sneered. He took a step forward, his hand hovering near his service weapon. "Emily, get up. You're causing a scene. We're going home." Emily flinched, as if he had struck her. Lily let out a high-pitched whimper and buried her face in Brian's suit jacket. Brian didn't move. He sat perfectly still, his hand resting on the rim of his whiskey glass. "Detective," Brian said. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "You seem lost." Harrow laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Moretti, I didn't know you ran a daycare. Give me the woman and the kid, and I won't write you up for serving minors." "They don't seem to want to go with you," Brian observed. "Domestic dispute." Harrow waved a hand dismissively, stepping closer. He was encroaching on Brian's personal space, a fatal error for most men. "Emily is my fiancée. She's having a breakdown. I'm here to take care of her." "He's lying," Lily screamed, her voice muffled by Brian's coat. "He hit Mummy! He hit me!" Harrow's face twisted into a snarl. "Shut your mouth, you brat!" He lunged forward, grabbing Emily by the arm to drag her up. Emily cried out in pain. That was the catalyst. Brian moved with the speed of a viper. In one fluid motion, he grabbed the heavy crystal whiskey decanter from the table and smashed it across Harrow's outstretched hand. Bones crunched. Harrow howled in agony, staggering back, clutching his shattered hand. Brian stood up. He towered over the detective. He adjusted his cufflinks, his face an unreadable mask of stone. "You touched my guest," Brian said softly. You assaulted a police officer." Harrow screamed, spit flying from his mouth. "I'll have this place shut down. I'll have you buried." Brian stepped out of the booth. He walked toward Harrow, forcing the detective to retreat toward the door. "You walked into my house," Brian said, his voice dropping an octave. "You threatened a woman. You terrified a child." Brian stopped inches from Harrow's face. He could smell the fear radiating off the cop now. "And you interrupted my drink." Brian turned to Dante. "Throw this garbage out. If he comes within 100 yards of this building again, he won't be walking away." Tiny and 2 other guards grabbed Harrow. The detective kicked and screamed threats, but he was dragged out into the rain like a bag of trash. The doors slammed shut, sealing the storm outside. Silence returned to the Vesper Lounge. Brian turned back to the booth. Emily was clutching Lily, shaking uncontrollably. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with shock. "Mr. Moretti," she whispered. He won't stop. He's going to come back with backup. You just started a war with the police." Brian looked at the bruise on Lily's wrist, then at the blood on Emily's lip. He felt a cold rage settling in his chest, a feeling he hadn't felt in a long time. It felt like purpose. "Let him come," Brian said. He extended a hand to Emily. "Get up. You're not going home. You're coming with me." The ride to the safe house was silent. The armored SUV cut through the rainy streets of New York, a moving fortress against the world. Emily sat in the back, Lily asleep in her lap. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving the child exhausted. Emily, however, was wide awake. She stared at the back of Brian's head as he drove. She had told Lily he was a king, a protector, but she knew the truth. Lord Brian Moretti was a monster. He just happened to be a monster with a code. She remembered the first time she met him. 3 years ago, at the Emerald Casino. He had tipped her $500 simply because a drunk patron had been rude to her. He hadn't said a word, just left the chips on the table and had security remove the drunk. She had never forgotten his eyes grey, like a winter storm. "Stop staring, Emily. It's loud," Brian said, his eyes watching her through the rearview mirror. Emily flinched. "I'm sorry. I don't know where you are taking us." "Somewhere Harrow can't find you," Brian replied. "My penthouse. The security there is military grade." "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why are you helping us?" "You don't do favors. Everyone knows that." Brian didn't answer immediately. He took a sharp turn onto a private road leading to a high-rise building that pierced the skyline. "The girl," Brian finally said. "She has guts, running into the lion's den to escape a hyena." The car came to a halt in a private underground garage. Dante was already there waiting with the security team. They ushered Emily and the sleeping Lily into a private elevator. The penthouse was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. It was cold, modern, and lacking any personal touch. It was the home of a man who didn't live. He merely existed. "Dante will show you to the guest wing," Brian said, taking off his jacket. "There are clothes, food, whatever you need. A doctor is on the way to check the girl's arm and your face." "I don't need a doctor," Emily argued weakly. "I need to leave town. Harrow, you don't understand, Brian. He's not just a cop. He's sick." Brian poured himself a drink from the bar cart. "Sit down, Emily." It wasn't a request. Emily sat on the edge of the sprawling white sofa. "Tell me everything," Brian commanded. "And don't lie. If I find out you're hiding something, I'll put you back on the street myself." Emily took a shaky breath. "I met Marcus Harrow 6 months ago. He was charming at first. He helped me when my landlord tried to evict us. I thought he was a good man." She laughed bitterly. "It started small, checking my phone, telling me what to wear. Then the drinking started. Then the hitting. She touched her swollen lip. I tried to leave last week. He laughed. He told me that if I ever tried to run, he'd plant drugs in my apartment and have Lily taken by child services. He said he'd make sure she went to a foster home where they break little girls. Brian's glass cracked in his hand. A hairline fracture invisible to the eye, but the sound was audible. Tonight, Emily continued, tears spilling over. He came home drunk. He was screaming about money he owed. He looked at Lily and he said she was worth a lot to the right people. Brian turned around slowly. His face was devoid of colour. He threatened to sell the child. He tried to grab her, Emily sobbed. I hit him with a frying pan and we ran. We just ran. I didn't know where to go. Lily. She remembered the king from the news. Brian finished his drink in one swallow. This wasn't just domestic abuse. This was something darker. Harrow owed money. He was desperate. And a desperate cop was the most dangerous creature on earth. You're safe here, Brian said, his voice final. For how long? Emily asked. He's the police. He'll turn the whole force against you. Let him try. Suddenly the elevator chimed. Dante stepped out, looking pale. He was holding a tablet. Boss, Dante said, urgency in his voice. You need to see this. Brian walked over and took the tablet. It was a live news feed. Breaking news. Mob boss Law Brian Moretti, wanted for attempted murder of decorated police officer. The screen showed Detective Harrow, his hand bandaged, standing in front of a horde of reporters outside a hospital. He looked like the victim. Law Brian Moretti attacked me in cold blood, Harrow was saying to the cameras, acting his heart out. I went into his club to retrieve a kidnapped woman and child. He is holding Emily Vance and her daughter hostage. We believe he is armed and dangerous. We are issuing a citywide manhunt. Brian stared at the screen. Harrow had flipped the script. He was using the media to paint Brian as the kidnapper. If the police raided the penthouse now, they wouldn't just arrest Brian. They would rescue Emily and Lily and hand them straight back to Harrow. And in the chaos of a raid, Brian might end up with a bullet in his head, resisting arrest. He's smart, Brian muttered. He's trying to corner me. SWAT is already mobilizing, Dante said grimly. We have maybe 20 minutes before they breach the lobby. Emily stood up, panic seizing her chest. They're coming. He's going to take Lily. Brian looked at the terrified woman. He looked at the sleeping child on the sofa. He had two choices. Hand them over and lawyer up, proving his innocence later, which would leave Emily and Lily at Harrow's mercy for days or weeks. Or run. If he ran, he was a fugitive. He would lose his businesses, his standing, his control. He looked at Lily's bruised wrist again. Dante, Brian barked. Initiate Protocol 0. Dante's eyes widened. Boss, that's the nuclear option. That means burning the safe house. Going off the grid completely. You lose the club. Do it, Brian said. He walked over to Emily and grabbed her hand. Wake the girl. We're leaving. Where? Emily cried. The only place he can't follow, Brian said, pulling a gun from a hidden compartment under the bar. My private airstrip. We're going to Italy. But the police? The police are looking for a mob boss in a penthouse. Brian said, a dark smirk playing on his lips. They aren't looking for a father taking his family on vacation. Emily froze. Family. Brian looked at her, his grey eyes intense. From this moment on, Emily, you are my wife, and Lily is my daughter. It's the only way to get you through customs without flagging the system. Act like you love me, Brian whispered, as sirens began to wail in the distance below. Our lives depend on it. The transition from mob boss to suburban father happened in the span of a 12-minute car ride to a private airfield in New Jersey. Brian drove with one hand on the wheel, his eyes constantly flicking to the rearview mirrors. The silence in the car was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic thrum of the engine and the distant wail of sirens that seemed to be closing in from all directions. "Open the glove compartment," Brian ordered, his voice tight. Emily, her hands still shaking, popped the latch. Inside were 3 passports. "I keep contingencies," Brian explained. "From now on, I am Lord Brian Rossi. You are my wife, Sophia, and Lily." He glanced at the rearview mirror where the child was wide awake, clutching a stuffed bear she had found in the car. "Lily is Lucia." "I don't know how to lie to the police," Emily whispered, thumbing the passport. The photo inside was her. It was an old photo, likely taken from her employee file at the casino. He had been prepared for this for a long time. Perhaps not for her specifically, but for a woman, a getaway partner. "You don't have to lie," Brian said. "You just have to be a tired mother. Let me do the talking. If they ask, we're going to my family's villa in Sicily for a funeral. Grief makes people ask fewer questions." They reached the airfield. The gates were closed, a single guard booth illuminated by a flickering halogen bulb. But it wasn't the private security guard Brian paid. It was a state trooper car. Emily gasped. "They found us. It's over." "Head down," Brian commanded. "Play with Lily. Distract her. Do not look at the cop." Brian rolled down the window as the trooper approached, flashlight beaming into the car. The rain was still pouring, masking the sweat on Brian's brow. He put on a pair of wire-rimmed glasses he pulled from his pocket, a simple prop that instantly softened his sharp features, making him look less like a killer and more like an architect or a professor. "Roads closed, sir," the trooper said, leaning in. "We have a fugitive situation in the city. All private flights are grounded pending inspection." "Officer, I understand," Brian said, his voice changing pitch. It was higher, more deferential. "But my mother, she passed away this morning in Palermo. We're trying to beat the storm to get home for the burial." The trooper shone the light into the back seat. Emily was stroking Lily's hair, her face buried in the child's neck to hide her terror. It looked like grief. It looked like a heartbroken mother comforting a confused child. The trooper's gaze lingered on Brian. "ID." Brian handed over the Law Brian Rossi passport. The trooper took it, walking back to his cruiser to run the name. "He's going to know," Emily hissed. "He's going to see your face is all over the news." "The news uses my mugshot from 5 years ago," Brian said calmly. "I had a beard then. I have glasses now. People see what they expect to see. He expects a monster. I'm giving him a mourning son." Minutes felt like hours. Lily began to whimper. "Mummy, I want to go home." "Shh, baby. We are going on an adventure," Emily soothed, though her voice cracked. The trooper returned. He handed the passport back. "My condolences, Mr. Rossi. You're clear to proceed, but be careful, the weather is nasty." "Thank you, officer." Brian rolled up the window and drove through the gate. He didn't speed up until they were out of the trooper's line of sight. As soon as they rounded the hangar, he floored it. "Get on the plane, now!" he barked, bringing the SUV to a screeching halt next to a sleek Gulfstream jet. The engines were already spooling up. Dante was standing by the stairs, an assault rifle openly slung across his chest now. "They breached the penthouse!" Dante shouted over the roar of the turbines. "Harrow is leading the team. They know you aren't there. They're tracking the car's GPS." "Destroy the car," Brian ordered, hustling Emily and Lily up the stairs. "You stay here, Dante. Clean up the loose ends in the city. If Harrow asks, I'm in Mexico." "Understood, boss. Buona fortuna." Brian slammed the cabin door shut and locked it. He moved into the cockpit, shouting at the pilot. "Go now, before they get onto the runway." The jet lurched forward. Emily buckled Lily into a wide, cream-colored leather seat. The luxury of the plane was staggering: gold fixtures, plush carpets, a bowl of fresh fruit on a mahogany table. It was a palace with wings. As the plane taxied violently fast, Emily looked out the window. Blue and red lights were flooding the tarmac they had just left. Police cruisers were racing toward the plane, but they were too late. The Gulf Stream roared, defying gravity, and lifted into the dark, storm-clouded sky. Emily watched the lights of New York fade until they were nothing but distant stars. She slumped back in her seat, the adrenaline crash hitting her like a physical blow. She closed her eyes, trembling. When she opened them, Brian was standing over her. He had removed the glasses. The morning sun was gone. The dawn was back. He poured a glass of water and held it out to her. "Drink." She took it, her hands shaking so much the water spilled on her dress. You did it. You actually got us out." "We aren't safe yet," Brian said, sitting in the seat opposite her. "Harrow isn't just a cop. He's obsessive. He'll check flight logs. He'll check manifests. It will take him a few days to figure out where Law Brian Rossi went, but he will figure it out. So what do? "We disappear in plain sight," Brian said. "In Sicily, my family is respected. The police there don't ask questions about guests of the Moretti estate. But to make this work, the lie has to be perfect." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Lily called you Mommy. That's good. But she needs to call me Papa and you." He paused, looking at her torn uniform and the bruise forming on her arm. "You need to trust me. I know you hate men like me. I know you think I'm just another violent thug. But right now I am the only thing standing between your daughter and a man who wants to sell her." Emily looked at Lily, who had fallen asleep instantly in the massive chair. "Why does he want her, Brian?" "You said he wanted to sell her. Why?" Brian hesitated. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a printout Dante had given him right before they left the garage. "Dante did some digging while we were driving," Brian said grimly. "Harrow isn't just in debt to loan sharks. He's in debt to the Albanian cartel, specifically a faction that deals in trafficking." Emily covered her mouth, a gag of nausea rising in her throat. "They demand payment." Brian continued, his voice devoid of emotion, but his eyes burning. "Harrow doesn't have the money, so he offered them a substitute, a pretty blonde child to wipe his debt clean." Emily let out a sob, a sound of pure maternal anguish. She lunged forward, grabbing Brian's hands. "Kill him. Please. I don't care about the law. I don't care about morality. I want him dead." Brian looked down at her hands, gripping his. It was the first time a woman had touched him, asking for death, not mercy. "I won't just kill him, Emily." Brian vowed, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "I'm going to make him wish he had died the day he met you." He squeezed her hands back, a pact sealed in blood and fear. "But first we have to survive Italy." The landing in Palermo was smooth, a stark contrast to the chaotic departure. The sun was just rising over the Mediterranean, painting the sky in hues of violent orange and soft purple. They took a helicopter from the airport to the estate, bypassing the roads entirely. The Villa Moretti was a fortress disguised as a paradise. Perched on a cliff overlooking the Tyrrhenian Sea, it was surrounded by high stone walls, olive groves, and armed guards who looked like groundskeepers. When they landed on the helipad, the air smelled of salt and lemons. It was quiet, peaceful. Emily stepped out, holding Lily's hand. Lily was wide-eyed, looking at the sprawling gardens. "Is this a castle?" she asked. "It's a safe house, Piccola," Brian said, stepping down behind them. He had changed on the plane into a linen shirt and slacks. He looked like a local. "And, yes, it's a bit like a castle." An elderly woman in a black dress came hurrying out of the main heavy wooden doors. This was Maria, the housekeeper, who had raised Brian after his own mother died. "Brian," she cried, throwing her arms up. She stopped when she saw Emily and Lily, her eyes narrowed, sharp and assessing. "You brought guests. You didn't tell me. I haven't prepared the guest wing." "They aren't guests, Maria," Brian said, resting a hand on Emily's lower back. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through Emily. It was possessive, firm, and part of the act. "This is Emily, and Lily. They are family." Maria's eyebrows shot up. She looked from Brian to Emily, then to the child. She saw the bruises. She saw the fear in Emily's posture. Maria's expression softened instantly. "Family," Maria repeated. She walked over and knelt in front of Lily. "Ciao, Bella. Are you hungry? I have fresh cannoli." Lily looked at Emily for permission. Emily nodded. "Go with her, sweetie." As Maria led Lily inside, the smile dropped from Brian's face. He turned to the head of security, a scarred man named Luca. "Lock it down," Brian ordered. "Perimeter patrols every 15 minutes. Sensors on the cliffside. If a seagull lands without permission, I want to know about it." "See, Don Law Brian." Luca nodded and vanished into the shadows. Brian turned to Emily. "Welcome home." The next 3 days were a blur of tension and strange domestic quiet. The villa was vast, filled with oil paintings and antique furniture. Emily and Lily were given a suite that overlooked the sea. It was the most beautiful place Emily had ever seen, but she felt like a prisoner. She couldn't leave the grounds. She couldn't use a phone. Brian had confiscated her cell to prevent tracking. Brian was busy most of the time, locked in his study, making calls, running his empire from a distance. But in the evenings for dinner, he emerged. They ate on the terrace. To maintain the cover for the staff, some of whom Brian didn't fully trust, they had to act the part. "Pass the salt caro," Emily said one evening, the word dear feeling foreign on her tongue. Brian handed it to her, his fingers brushing hers. "You look better," he commented. "The bruise on your lip is fading." "The nightmares aren't," she admitted quietly. "Lily wakes up screaming every night. She thinks Harrow is under the bed." Brian stopped eating. He put his fork down. "I can teach her." "Teach her what?" "How not to be afraid." The next morning, Emily woke up to find Lily's bed empty. Panic seized her heart. She ran out onto the balcony and looked down into the garden. There by the fountain was Brian. He was kneeling on the grass. Lily was standing in front of him. He was holding a small wooden practice sword. Emily rushed down, but stopped behind a pillar to listen. "Fear is a signal," Brian was saying, his voice low and serious. He wasn't talking to her like a child. He was talking to her like an equal. "It tells you danger is close. But you cannot let it drive the car. You understand? Lily nodded, her face scrunched in concentration. Like the bad man. Yes, the bad man uses fear to make you small, Brian said. But you are not small. You are a Moretti now, and Morettis do not cower. He handed her the wooden sword. If someone tries to grab you, you don't pull away. You step in, you stomp on their foot, you aim for the nose, you make them hurt. Brian, Emily cried out, stepping into the sunlight. She's 5. Don't teach her how to fight. Brian looked up. I'm teaching her how to survive, Emily. Harrow isn't the only monster in the world. Lily looked at her mother, brandishing the stick. Look, Mummy, I'm brave. Emily's heart broke and swelled at the same time. She walked over and took the stick gently. I know you're brave, baby. Go inside and get some juice. When Lily ran off, Emily turned on Brian. Stop trying to turn her into you. I'm trying to keep her from ending up like you. Brian snapped. The words hung in the air, cruel and sharp. Emily flinched. Excuse me. Brian stood up, towering over her. Helpless, relying on men to save you. You have fire. Emily, I saw it in the club, but you don't know how to use it. If I die, who protects her? You have to be strong enough to do what is necessary. I am strong, Emily hissed, stepping into his space. I kept her alive for 5 years with a man who beat me every day. I took the hits so she wouldn't have to. Don't you dare tell me I'm weak. Brian stared at her. The anger in her eyes mirrored his own. For a moment, the air between them crackled with something that wasn't just anger. It was recognition. 2 broken people who had learned to survive in different ways. Brian reached out his hand, hovering near her face. For a second, Emily thought he might strike her, but he just tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was burning hot. Then show me, he whispered. Stop acting like a victim. Be the queen she thinks you are. He walked away, leaving her standing in the garden, her heart pounding against her ribs. That night, the illusion of safety shattered. It was 2:00 a.m. The house was asleep. Emily was in the guest room, tossing and turning. Suddenly the door opened. She sat up, clutching the sheets. Brian! He was standing in the doorway, fully dressed, a gun in a holster under his arm. His face was grim. Get Lily, he said. We have a problem. What is it? One of the guards missed his check-in, Brian said, moving into the room and tossing a duffel bag onto the bed. And the external sensors just picked up 3 vehicles coming up the private road. No lights. Harrow, she gasped. No, Brian said, checking the magazine of his pistol. Harrow doesn't have the jurisdiction or the resources to raid a villa in Sicily. This is something else. He looked at her. Someone sold us out. Someone told the Albanian cartel where we are. A crash echoed from downstairs, the sound of glass shattering. Then gunfire, rapid suppressed shots. Foot, foot, foot. They're inside, Brian said. He grabbed Emily's arm. We can't go out the front. We have to go to the catacombs. Catacombs, the tunnels beneath the wine cellar. They lead to the beach caves. He dragged her into the hallway. Lily was standing there, rubbing her eyes, clutching her bear. Papa? She asked sleepily. Brian scooped her up in one arm, keeping his gun in the other. Hold on tight, Piccola. We're playing the quiet game. They ran down the grand staircase, but as they reached the landing, a figure stepped out of the shadows of the living room. It wasn't an Albanian hitman. It wasn't a stranger. It was Luca. the head of security, the man Brian trusted with his life. Luca was holding a gun, and it was pointed directly at Brian's chest. "I'm sorry, Don Law Brian," Luca said, his voice shaking slightly. "They offered me 10 million euros. I have a family too." Brian stopped dead. He tightened his grip on Lily. "You're making a mistake, Luca. They won't pay you. They'll kill you to tie up the loose end." "Maybe," Luca shrugged. "But if I let you go, they will definitely kill my wife. Put the gun down, Brian. Give me the girl. They only want the girl." Emily let out a stifled scream. Brian looked at Luca. He looked at the gun pointed at him. He calculated the angle. If he shot, Luca might squeeze the trigger in a reflex. And Lily was right in the line of fire. "Take me," Brian said, stepping in front of Emily, and Lily shielding them with his body. "Let them go. Take me instead." "They don't want you," Luca said sadly. "The girl is the payment. Give her to me." Brian's eyes went cold. "Come and take her." The hallway was frozen in time. The sound of rain lashing against the villa windows seemed miles away. All that existed was the barrel of Luca's gun, the sleeping child in Brian's arms, and the terrible realization that loyalty had a price tag. "Don't do this, Luca," Brian said, his voice eerily calm. He shifted his weight imperceptibly, shielding Lily's head with his shoulder. "The Albanians. They don't leave witnesses. Once you hand her over, you're a liability." "I have a plane waiting in Palermo," Luca countered, though sweat beaded on his forehead. "Put the girl down, Brian. I don't want to kill you. You were good to me." "I was better than good," Brian said softly. "I was your brother." "Business is business." Luca snapped his finger, tightening on the trigger. "Drop the gun. Now." Brian slowly bent his knees, placing his weapon on the floor. He stood back up, hands raised, Lily still clutched tight to his chest. "Okay, you win. Let the woman go." "No." Luca shook his head. "She comes too. They want the set." Emily stood behind Brian, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked around, frantically. The hallway was lined with marble busts of Roman emperors on pedestals. Heavy, solid. She remembered Brian's words in the garden. "Stop acting like a victim. Be the queen." Luca stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Brian, confident that the Don was neutralized. He reached out with his free hand to grab Emily's arm to pull her forward. It was a fatal error. He took his eyes off the weak woman for a split second. Emily didn't scream. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed the heavy marble bust of Marcus Aurelius from the pedestal beside her. It must have weighed 20 pounds, but adrenaline made it feel like paper. With a guttural grunt of effort, she swung it. Crack! The marble struck the side of Luca's head with sickening force. Luca's gun went off, a deafening boom in the enclosed space. The bullet shattered a mirror behind Brian, missing him by inches. Luca crumbled to the floor unconscious before he hit the ground. Lily woke up screaming. "Move!" Brian roared. He didn't reach for his fallen gun. He grabbed Emily's hand, dragging her over Luca's body. "The shots will draw them. We have seconds." They sprinted down the hallway toward the kitchen. Behind them, the front doors exploded inward. Shouts in Albanian echoed through the foyer. Heavy boots stomped on the hardwood. "Kitchen pantry," Brian ordered. They burst into the massive industrial kitchen. Brian kicked the pantry door open. Inside shelves were lined with pasta and olive oil. He shoved a heavy shelving unit aside, revealing a dark, damp stone staircase leading down into the earth. "Go." "Don't stop until you hit sand," Brian shouted, pushing Emily and Lily into the darkness. "Brian, come on," Emily screamed, looking back. "I have to seal the door." Brian grabbed a canister of propane used for the stoves. He cracked the valve open, the hissing sound filling the room. He threw it toward the kitchen entrance, just as two men in tactical gear burst in. Brian stepped into the secret passage and slammed the heavy iron door shut, locking it from the inside. Boom! The muffled explosion shook the ground beneath their feet. Dust rained down from the ceiling of the tunnel. "Keep moving," Brian urged, taking Lily from Emily. "The blast will buy us 2 minutes, maybe 3. They ran. The catacombs were ancient, smelling of rot and old wine. The only light came from the flashlight on Brian's phone. They stumbled over uneven stones, winding deeper and deeper under the cliffs. After what felt like an eternity, the air changed. It became cooler, fresher. The smell of salt water. They emerged into a natural cave, opening at the base of the cliffs. The ocean roared outside, black and angry. A small Zodiac boat was tied to a rusted iron ring, bobbing violently in the swell. "Get in," Brian commanded. He helped them into the boat. As he stepped in, his leg buckled. He collapsed onto the rubber floor of the dinghy, groaning through gritted teeth. "Brian!" Emily scrambled to him. She saw it then. A dark stain spreading across the white linen of his shirt just above his hip. "You're shot," she whispered, horror flooding her veins. "Ricochet," Brian gasped, sweat pouring down his face. "From the hallway. It's not deep. It's bleeding a lot," Emily cried, pressing her hands against the wound. "Start the engine," Brian rasped, grabbing her wrist with a bloody hand. "Emily, look at me. Start the engine. If they get Kimminga to the cliff edge, they will have the high ground. We will be fish in a barrel." Emily looked at the controls. She had never driven a boat, but she looked at Lily huddled in the bow, shivering. She looked at Brian, who was fading fast. She grabbed the pull cord. She yanked. Nothing. She yanked again. The engine sputtered and died. High above them on the cliff edge, flashlights cut through the darkness. Voices shouted. Then the water around the boat erupted in small geysers. Bullets. "Start it!" Brian roared. Emily screamed in frustration and pulled the cord with every ounce of strength she had left. The engine roared to life. "Go out to sea!" Emily slammed the throttle forward. The small boat leaped over a wave, slamming down hard, jarring their bones. She steered them away from the jagged rocks into the open blackness of the Tyrrhenian Sea. Bullets pinged off the water behind them, but soon they were swallowed by the night and the storm. They drove for an hour in silence. The only sound, the roar of the engine and the crashing waves. When Emily finally felt safe enough to slow down, she turned to Brian. He was unconscious. His skin was grey. "Brian?" She shook him. "Brian, wake up!" He didn't move. "Mommy," Lily whispered. "Is Papa sleeping?" Emily looked at the vast, empty ocean around them. No radio, no land in sight. A dying man and a traumatized child. "Yes, baby," Emily said, tears mixing with the sea spray on her face. "He's just sleeping. Keep watch for me." "Okay. Look for lights." Emily ripped the hem of her dress. She folded the fabric into a thick pad. She pressed it hard into the bullet hole in Brian's side. "You don't get to die," she hissed at him, her voice fierce. "You made me a promise. You said we were family. You don't leave family." She pressed harder. Brian groaned in his unconscious state. "That's it," she cried softly. "Feel the pain. Stay with me." Under the moonlight, drifting in the middle of the Mediterranean, Emily Vance stopped being a waitress. She stopped being a victim. She became the woman who would keep the devil himself alive if it meant saving her daughter. The fishing trawler. Santa Lucia found them at dawn, a tiny speck drifting in the violent swell of the Tyrrhenian Sea. Captain Giuseppe pulled them aboard just as the first rays of light hit the water. 2 days later, Brian opened his eyes. He was in a safe house in Naples, the air thick with the smell of antiseptic and stale coffee. Pain radiated from his side like fire. He tried to sit up, but a hand pushed him gently back. "Easy, boss. You lost half your blood." It was Dante looking haggard and grim. "Emily," Brian rasped, panic spiking his heart rate. "Asleep in the chair." Dante nodded toward the corner. Emily was curled up with Lily, wearing oversized clothes, exhausted but safe. "She stitched you up on the boat, Brian. Fishing line and a lighter. The doctor said she saved your life." Brian looked at her sleeping form. The waitress who had trembled at his feet in the club was gone. A warrior had taken her place. "Where do we stand?" Brian asked, shifting his focus to the war. Dante's expression darkened. "It's bad. Harrow has gone public. He's painting you as a kidnapper who fled the country. He's seized the Vesper Lounge, frozen your accounts, and turned the police force into his personal army." "Let him have the money," Brian grunted. "It's not just the money," Dante said. "Tonight, Harrow is hosting a summit at the Vesper. He's meeting the heads of the 5 families. He's selling your territory to them in exchange for protection. If that meeting ends, you're a king without a kingdom." Brian sat up, fighting through the agony in his side. "Get the jet ready. We're going back." "You can't walk," Dante argued, "and every cop in New York has your face on a wanted poster." "I don't need to walk," Brian growled, swinging his legs off the bed. "I just need to shoot." Emily stirred, waking instantly at the sound of his voice. She saw him sitting up and rushed over. "You idiot! Lay down." "We're leaving," Brian told her, his eyes burning with fever and resolve. "I won't let a dirty cop burn down what I built." "To do what?" "Get killed," Emily demanded. "Harrow will have an army at the door." "He will," Brian admitted. He took her hand, his grip weak but his intent lethal. "I can't walk through the front door, Emily. They'll kill me on sight. I need a distraction. I need a Trojan horse." Emily stared at him, realization dawning cold in her stomach. "You want me to go to him?" "He wants you to validate his lie," Brian said softly. "If you walk in, if you tell them you escaped me, he will let his guard down. He's arrogant. He thinks he broke you." Emily looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully. She thought of the fear that had ruled her life for years. Then she looked at the man who had taken a bullet for her daughter. She squeezed Brian's hand. "Tell me what to do." The Vesper Lounge dissolved in a cloud of plaster and pulverized brick. The explosion was deafening, silencing the arrogant threats of the 5 families. Through the gaping wound in the back wall, Lord Brian Moretti emerged from the smoke. He didn't look like a dead man. He looked like a reckoning. He limped, blood seeping through the tactical vest at his waist, but his grip on the assault rifle was iron. Behind him, a dozen laser sights cut through the haze, painting the chests of the rival dons in dancing red dots. "Drop them," Brian commanded. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a death sentence. The bodyguards threw down their weapons, realizing the math was against them. Only Harrow refused to accept defeat. Panic stripped him of his sanity. He lunged, snatching Emily and jamming his service pistol against her temple. "Back off!" Harrow shrieked, cowering behind her. "I'll kill her, I swear, Moretti. I'll paint the walls with her." Brian lowered his rifle slowly. He stood 10 feet away, his eyes locking on to Emily's. In the past, she would have frozen. She would have waited to be saved. But the woman standing in the ruins of the club wasn't a waitress anymore. She was a survivor who had stitched a bullet wound in a storm. She saw Brian's eyes flick to Harrow's foot. A signal. Fear is a signal he had taught her daughter. Use it. Emily didn't scream. She drove her heel down with savage force, crushing Harrow's instep. As he howled and his grip loosened, she rammed her elbow backward into his solar plexus. Harrow doubled over. Emily dropped to the floor and rolled. "Now!" she screamed. Brian moved faster than a heartbeat. He drew the heavy Desert Eagle from his vest. Bang! Bang! The first shot shattered Harrow's shoulder. The second obliterated his knee. The detective collapsed, writhing in agony, his gun skittering away. Brian limped forward, kicking the weapon aside. He stood over the weeping man, his face a mask of cold indifference. "You can't kill a cop," Harrow sobbed, clutching his shattered leg. "You aren't a cop," Brian said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "You are a trafficker who tried to sell my daughter to pay a gambling debt." He turned to the stunned Dons. "He sold you out, too. Dante has the bank transfers. He was going to hand your territories to the Albanians for pennies." Russo the oldest. Don looked at Harrow with disgust and nodded once at Brian. Permission granted. This was personal. "Brian, please," Harrow begged, reaching out a bloody hand. "I can help you." "You made a fatal error, Marcus," Brian said, leaning down. "You touched what is mine. In my world, there is no appeal." Brian stood up and turned his back. "Emily, look away." "No," she said, her voice steady, adrenaline and rage fueling her. "I want to watch." Brian nodded to Dante. "Take out the trash." Two guards dragged the screaming Harrow toward the back exit. The heavy steel door slammed shut, sealing his fate. The silence that followed was heavy. Brian holstered his gun and swayed, his vision blurring from blood loss. Emily caught him before he fell, burying her face in his chest. "It's done," he rasped, holding her tight. "The king is back." Emily looked up at him, tears mixing with the dust on her face. Long live the king. And that is the story of how a single rainy night changed the fate of the most dangerous man in New York. Lord Brian Moretti thought he was a king, but he was just a ruler until he found something worth dying for. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the strongest people aren't the ones who can inflict pain, but the ones who can endure it for the people they love. Emily and Brian proved that family isn't just about blood. It's about who bleeds for you. In a world of crime and betrayal, their loyalty was the only law that mattered. They found light in the darkest of places, proving that even a beast can learn to love if he's given a reason to fight. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more intense stories like this one. What did you think of Emily's transformation? Would you have pulled the trigger on Harrow? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a chapter of our next drama. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.